The title of Damon's presentation is Managing Islands Through Traditional Knowledge, Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, Lake Superior. Let's give a hand to Damen Panek.
Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Buju, Indinwe Maganaduk, Minwan each Primata Sijik. Nui Wanashque Tagos. Gege Pangi, Nue Kido Jibuemo winning. Gikainaman, Bungi to go, Ginisiro Tanawa, Nindin Waywin, Minawa Geget, Ninsa, Ninisiro Tum, Bungi to go, Nindin Waywin. I suppose I gotta hold this up here. Gishpin, Gichiapi Tendagwad, Ginun Danawan, Nindin Waywin. Damen Panek, Indigenous Kas, Gijibide Anaquad, Indigo, Gawal Biganaka, Gishkanagining, and Dunjiba, Minawa Misqua Bikang, and Da. In Dananuki, Wadi, Ngabe Anung, Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, Chimokaman, Jinaka De Maguk, Minawa, Wayne Buju, Ominasaning, Nishnabe, Jinaka Damawad. Nungumadash, Nuidbajim, Wazichgayang, Gayget Nim and Wendam, Bijaye Goma, Imbagosain Dun, Nandigikain Dwinama. Nungumadash, Nuidbajim, Nishnabe, Jitwawan, Nishnabe, Adasokana, and Minawan, Nishnabe Moen. Gishpin Bakanad, Ginisrotanawa, Gidikimanan. Gayget me wenja, Gete Nishnabe, Gababama, Diziwa, Giwadi, Wayne Buju, Ominasaning. Minwa, Megwa, Gababama, Diziwa, Gete Nishnabe, Ganawabawada, Omenumen. Gayget, Ogi mi Kanawa, Omenuin, mi Ejgwa, Gete Nishnabe, Gababama, Diziwag, Minwa, Gitajikewag, Iwadi, Morning Guanakaning. Gayget, Gidikimanan, Ingu Ondada, Nishnabe, Jitwawan. Gakina Wea, Giguyag, Manidunsug, Beneshiwag, Waintsiag, Waintsiensug, Minwab, Bataninawag, Ogi Ojitunawa, Nishnabe Bimadazuinawa. Nishnabe Jitwawan, Nishnabe Moen, Nishnabe Bimadazuin, Ingu Ondadad, Nukamisaki Nane. Akoe, Majita da, Minawa, Gishpin Gate, Nishnabeg, Oma, Nigagwejimagwa, Gwech. Gishpin Gi, Wanagijwayan, Nungum, Gada, Guac Sadun, Osa, Gagigawin, Gawing Gakinagego, and Gakin Dazin. Up in a new Quajitumana, Gazichke Yang, Devishkoin Ma, Gazichke Wad, Me Wenja. Amigomanekwa Kirian, Mi Ejigwa. Misa you. So I was working with an elder, and he asked me what I do, right? So at the park, I'm a park ranger, cultural educator, firefighter, all that fun stuff. And so I told him my main job is to talk to visitors about our place, about what it means to us, where we come from. And he reminded me, he said, use the language as much as possible when I speak in front of people. Remind them that we still have it, we still love it, we still carry it in our hearts and our minds, and we're still here, right? And then he also said, plus you can talk about them and they probably won't know what you're saying, so whatever, right? But it's important, right? It is who we are, using the language. And like I said, I don't know everything. I'm still learning the language. I'm probably in second grade when it comes to the language, but I try and do it as much as possible. And like I also said, if there's any elders in here that feel like they need to correct me, feel free. It's kind of, well, you all probably know, being a young person speaking in front of elders is sometimes awkward, right? We usually let them talk for us. So what I want to talk about today is some examples of Ojibwe culture, like getting into the real deep parts, using the language to explore meanings that are throughout that. I'm going to talk about fire management in the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, and then we'll actually talk about one of the units that we actually burned. And I'm super happy to be able to do this with y'all, because usually when I talk about fire ecology, that's me at the normal people party. I get carried away sometimes. So if somebody has something to throw at me, feel free to do that. I get a little excited when I talk about fire. And it's what's super cool, I think, about it is that there are so many aspects of fire, social, political, intercultural, that come into this. It's not just about fire. There's so much to it. And it's not linear. So I apologize for that. It's very kind of like bouncing around. So I try to do my best to make it like a linear progress, but I'm going to bounce around, so I apologize. And I mentioned it earlier that I'll be around, pretty much the whole day until tomorrow. I might go exploring a little bit today. But if you need anything, feel free to grab me and ask me more. So there is a super cool TED Talk on why cultural diversity matters, like what's the point, why it matters, that I have, but I won't take the time to show that right now. But if you all want to look it up, I can get you the link for it. To summarize it, basically what this gentleman is talking about is that the problems that we have today, the things that we have to solve today, are not going to be solved by the same way of thinking that caused them. We need diversity of thought, we need diversity of understanding, diversity of input to provide answers for the questions that we have today. And going back to the people who have lived at a place for a very, very long time, who have that institutional, traditional knowledge, is one way to add that layer into it, right? Into solving problems or solving issues or things like that. So it's a really cool talk. He talks about, and I'll get into it a little bit with words and things like that, but he worked in New Zealand with the Maori people, and there, whenua is a word for the placenta. So when everybody who is born, you spend your time in the placenta for a long time, for 9 months. And then that same word, placenta, is also the same word for land. So the same exact word is used for both of those meanings, based on the context of what you're talking about. And so what he talks about is, would your way of thinking about the world be different if that word was the same for you, right? And that's what I'm going to get into next. So just to provide some foundation here, we know that Ojibwe and Anishinaabe people have lived in this area for thousands and thousands of years. So everything about this place and where I'm from has shaped us, right? The wood ticks, the mosquitoes, the seasons, the sky, the stars, the lakes, all that stuff has shaped how we think. And one thing I get to do with fire is travel all over the place. And wherever I go somewhere, it's so confusing to me to try and connect, because everything's so different. The trees, the plants, the everything. I mean, even flying into Toronto yesterday, holy cow, I'm I don't know where things are, what to do, and all that. It's just different, right? And everybody can connect that way. It's not just Native people, but everybody can connect to home, right? What we call home. And that's what shapes us. So that's the baseline. That experience, that understanding, that relationship for thousands of years, for a long time, not even just thousands, but hundreds of years, generations, constitutes traditional ecological knowledge, which is a deep relationship to the world around you. And then that's passed down through generations and generations, through story or through whatever it is. And I like to use this photo. I think I bring it back again, but you can see in this photo, this is a photo actually of them, some tribal folks in Mille Lacs area, which is Minnesota, playing a game. You can kind of see there's a drum right here, and there's little tabs right there. They're playing moccasin game. And what I like about this picture is that this tree right here is burnt. And you can see there's not much understory in this whole, whoops, what did I do? In this whole picture, there's not much growth on the ground. That's because this area has burned over and over and over again. So you have these big trees that are left behind that are adapted to having fire go around them, and then the understory gets cleared out. So I like using that picture as an example of what fire does. So TEK, traditional ecological knowledge, is a cumulative body of knowledge and beliefs handed down through generations by cultural transmission about the relationship of human beings, of living things, including humans, with one another and their environment. Further, TEK is an attribute of societies with historical continuity in resource use practices. By and large, these are non-industrial or less technologically advanced societies, many of them indigenous or tribal. And one thing I want to point out about TEK, in trying to talk to like our ologists at our park, the biologists and all these folks, TEK is also, it's another way of knowing, right? It's a way of understanding the world around you, and just like the scientific process, it follows strict understandings and guidelines and has checks and balances, right? I was talking with actually my mom yesterday, and we were talking about traditional ecological knowledge, how it's tested, hypotheses are tested, they're put out there, they're practiced, where the results come in. We share that research with our families through stories and through just passing of that culture. And it's deliberate, and it's also, how do I get this right, the right way, but our lives depend on it. Our lives depended on it, right? So if you screw up a berry crop by burning it at the wrong time, or if you screw up a wild rice crop, your family suffers for this. So this isn't just studying some fungus on the back of some salamander because you're curious about it. This is literally my life, my family's lives depend on this stuff, making it right. So just to kind of put that out there. So what I want to do is use the language, Anishinaabe, and also some English words to help describe the power of words and help describe how meaningful and how much, basically, and then just give a little bit of our culture out there. And Scott Momaday said, words were medicine. They were magic and invisible. They came from nothing into sound and meaning. They were beyond price. They could neither be bought or sold. So some words for you all. Gibagoneonanig. In our language, we have our genders are split into animate and inanimate beings, right? So whatever is inanimate, like a table or a chair or a door, those are inanimate things, right? And everything else is animate. And so we are animate, mosquitoes are animate, fish are animate, birds are animate, trees are animate, meaning they have life, they have like a spirit, right? They're beings. Bagone is the verb for to put a hole in someone, putting a hole in someone. This is what we say when we do our talks for tapping maple trees. Gibagoneananig. And what it literally translates to is we're going to put holes in them, right? We're not putting holes in inanimate things. We're putting actually holes in animate beings, right? That's literally what we say when we say that. So again, kind of going back to that Whenua idea, how does your mindset work if when you say you're going to tap trees, you're actually saying we're going to put holes in them, right? Kind of changes maybe how you think about stuff. So an English word that I like to pull out, wilderness. So we all have these ideas of wilderness, and I highlighted some of the words in there that kind of pop out for me. This is from the Wilderness Act in the States. Wilderness in contrast with those areas where man and his works dominate the landscape. So we're talking about a landscape that is not manipulated by man, right? Untrammeled by man, who does not remain. So a lot of kind of loaded words in this definition of wilderness, right? And so this came into effect when our park is 80% wilderness, designated wilderness, where you actually have literally some areas that were completely modified by people through fire. So how can you have wilderness in a place where people have been actually manipulating the environment for thousands of years? So in an interesting way. And this is a long quote, but basically the idea of pristine wilderness and how most of this entire North of America was manipulated by natives, but then seemingly it seemed as though there was just nature doing its thing, right? couple other Ojibwe words. Bun. Bun is a suffix that we put on words to mean used to be. Used to be. So if we have a relative or someone who passes away, we put their name and then bun on the end to mean like they used to be that person, right? Ese refers to a shell. A shell. So this word literally means the one who used to be a shell. And this is our word for a raccoon. And there's a story for how the raccoon got this name. So when we say it, that's literally what comes to our mind, is that one that used to be a shell, right? A subakeshe. She is like the suffix we use on the end of words to mean the one who does it, the one who makes it, or the one who performs this. Ike in the middle there is to make something, and the first part of that word is a sub. A sub is a net, like a net. So this literally refers to, when you say this word, the net maker, right? Who do we think this is? The spider is who this is. A subakeshe, the net maker, right? So another English word that we use a lot, and I've been really conscious lately about using this word, is its. What do we think of when we hear the word its? I think of inanimate, a thing, an object, right? And here's an article that I pulled off of Facebook this is actually a really cool video if you want to check it out. But so this lion was literally fighting for his life. A bunch of hyenas were circling him and things like that. But in the the header, in a fight for its life, what does it mean in terms of how we think about the world when we say its life? I've been trying to be super conscious of that in my own, like when I go hunting deer, I shoot him, right? Or I shoot her, or we're going to eat him, right? And not it. I'm really trying not to do that, because I think that really frames our position. Miigwech is the word that we use for thank you. And that's kind of why I want to use this one also, because when you say thank you, like, what does that really mean? What does that really mean when you say those words? And in Ojibwe, the literal translation of miigwech literally means everything that you've done for me, right? Everything that you've done for me. So when we say thank you, it kind of like sterilizes the whole meaning of that word, right? I mean, like, what does it really mean when you say that? But when you literally say miigwech, or when you say miigwech, what it literally means, everything you've done for me. The word discover, and I'm sure you all can recognize the power of that word. This was something Rush Limbaugh said, which also refers to land. So anyway, we know that obviously this place wasn't discovered by Columbus, but it is a powerful narrative, right? It's something that continues to perpetuate like how we think about stuff. So another word, akiwenzi. Akiwenzi is the word that we use for like an elderly man. And the first part of that word is ake. And that refers actually to land, to the earth, ake. The last part of that word, the etymology of this word, how it's built, refers to protecting it. And so the literal translation of akiwenzi refers to the one who protects the land, right? So when you say that word, and this, I'll get to this in a little bit, but, so when we translate a word from akiwenzi to old man, you lose that story of it, right? Mindamuye, so that ye is again kind of like that she, where the one who does it. Mindamuye comes from like minjamendam, which is to like gather. And this is the word that we use for an elderly woman, an old lady, right? What this word literally means in our language, when you break down the words of it, it means the one who brings us together, the one who holds us together, right? So think of that. Mindamuye, or old lady, or the one who carries us, brings us all together, right? The word settled. So I see this a lot in, documents in the park and everything. And this is some field notes from some of the early, they were documenting all the different land and pre-European settlement, which implies that the land was not settled prior to Europeans and it was just, crazy. And then they show up and everything's, settled now. I know, it's powerful, right? I mean, we still use that. Niawente is the word that, so we, in our culture, we have kind of like a parallel with, like Christian or Catholic culture where you have what's the one you get like I can't remember, think about it. Where you get like your, not your foster parents, but your like godparents, yeah. I don't know why that came to my mind. But, so that's kind of a similar thing. Niawe'e, is our namesakes. So when we get our Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe Zowin, our native name, like when I said that in the beginning, how we're known, that's literally what we mean by that. We have like sponsors, and these are our Niawe'e. And what that word literally refers to, Nia is almost like my body. And so it's almost like I'm you and you're me now. That's the relationship with that. Niawe'e. Bizaniduin. So over by us, Bizanian is what our teachers always yell at us when we're talking and not listening. Bizan refers to like calm or listen. IDI is a word that we put on the suffix to mean a reciprocal, like you're doing it to me and I'm doing it to you. Win is the suffix we put on words to mean change a verb into a noun. So literally what this translates to is they're content with each other or they're listening to each other. And this is the word that we use for peace. Peace, right? They're listening to each other. They're like calm with each other. A gusk is a bird. And what this bird, the translation of this, the etymology of this word, literally means like firebird. And here's my transition. So this bird is dependent on landscapes that have been burned to create their leks. Leks, this is a sharp-tailed grouse. So grouse need open, clear areas to do their dances, to attract their mates, and that happens through fire, right? So that's how they actually got their name. So it's like the fire bird, right? Because after something was burned, they'd always show up and keep hanging out. And this is an important one because this is, by us, what they're burning for in the Barrens is to try and get more of these back. Back in the 1920s, when Aldo Leopold was up there, he was counting like thousands and thousands. I think he estimated like 5,000 to 7,000 Auguskwug, sharp-tailed grouse in that area. There are 9 today. 9. So that's why another reason why we're trying to bring fire back. So, transition to fire. This is me when I was younger and skinnier, about 15 years ago. I've been doing wildland fire for now, this will be my 19th season, and I love it. It's the first time I burned, it was, like adrenaline big time, and I was really attracted to it for some reason. I could never really pin it down why. But as I've grown more into it, I think a lot about it and how it has connected to my culture more. And then maybe that's it. Maybe that's the draw. Even though it still is really fun. And this is an actual picture, an action shot of us getting ready to fight a fire in Georgia. It's the actual shot of that. Okay. So how this transitions into where I'm from. So Apostle Islands National Lakeshore is 21 of the 22 islands off the Bayfield Peninsula in northern Wisconsin. So this is like Superior, Duluth area. Here is like the Keweenaw Peninsula, and you all are like way over off the screen, right? So this is a satellite picture of the place. Lake Superior here, Isle Royal here. This is Canada up here. This is Minnesota over in this area. A little closer shot. 22 islands. Madeline Island, this big one here, is not part of the park. There's a year-round community that lives out there. The rest of these are part of the park, and there's a little stretch of mainland also. The closest one is Basswood right here. It's a mile offshore. The furthest one out is Outer, which is 26 miles offshore. So this is my office. So in I think it was 2012 or so, the guy who was running the fire program for the park retired. And so I was next in line to take that over. So I became the fire management coordinator for Apostle Islands, which means that basically all aspects of wildland fire I am in charge of. So if we have a lightning strike, if we have a campfire escape, prescribed fire, fire use, all that stuff. And sorry, I get in the weeds, so just throw something at me if I start saying the fire lingo that you need to clarify on. So I took that over, and then in the park in 2005, we have a fire management plan. So I went into that and kind of used that as my directive, like, okay, so what are we supposed to be doing with this park? And in that management plan, there's one appendix that talks about burning out on Stockton Island, which is this island right here. So I went to management there and I said, okay, so are we supposed to be doing this? It says it in the plan that we're supposed to be burning. Should we start getting ready to do this? And the people who had even signed this thing, like, whoa, wait a second, we need to think about that. So we started talking more and more about what that means to burn on this landscape. And we had actually, it's a park service, so we have a long history of suppression, dating back to the early 1900s, because that's when, fire was bad. And Smokey the Bear and Bambi didn't help to anything with that, actually creating a better understanding of fire. But, back then that was a lot of the fires that were happening, even in this area, were a result of the slash piles that were left behind from logging, which dried out and became just like this huge fuel load. And then they burned and everybody thought fire was bad, right? So there's that narrative, and that's kind of what this is all about, is like how powerful narratives are and how powerful narratives can shape what we think even beyond the truth. So we started talking about fire and whether or not we should put it on the landscape. Up until this point, we were 100% suppression, meaning even if it was a lightning strike on the middle of an island, which was obviously a natural event, we would go put it out. So that was the mentality, right? We wouldn't just let it happen. Now, at this point, we've come a long way. We're starting to, we say allow, but basically any sort of lightning strike now, we will monitor it and let it do its thing and recognize that it's a natural part of the ecosystem, right? So for this, though, this was like a direct application of fire. Like, are we going to literally light torches and start dripping fire on the ground? Do we want to do that? So we started looking into what it would mean to burn out there. And part of where this plan came from was with not only recognizing the type of ecosystem that was out there, but also recognize that Native people have been out there burning for a long time too. So this area right here of the island is tombolo. It's an Italian word, tombolo, right? And what it refers to, it's a geologic formation. So this, about 5,000 years ago, was one big island. And this was another little island. And then so a lot of our winds, probably from here too, are like northerly. It's always either north or northeast or northwest. And that causes erosion, which causes longshore drift, which causes deposition on most of the south sides of the island. So you can see like where a lot of our sand spits are all on like the south sides. Yeah, it's a bad picture, sorry. But all of our deposition happens like on the south side of the island, which means that basically all that is sand then. So this whole area right here is basically all sand. There's bedrock 170 feet below the lake level, but most of that is sand. So that means it's it drains well. It doesn't hold water. It basically provides the type of structure needed for some kinds of species. And those species are red pine, white pine, jack pine, and blueberries. So here's a closer image of it. And so this is the area that the burn plan, or the fire management plan, was talking about burning. And so we started looking more into this space, and we started investigating what we have out there. And what we have out there are a lot of fire scar. And this is what I think is really cool about this too, is I've been working there now since 2000, and I never knew about this stuff until it was pointed out to me that it is so present. So for all these years, I had been walking right past all these stumps, walking past all this stuff and not knowing what I was actually walking past until recently. So what we know about fire is that, kind of going back to this, frequent low-intensity fires across a landscape promote certain types of species, right? Some trees, like birch, maple, they don't like fire at all. So if you burn near them, they usually die out. Red pine, white pine, jack pine can survive fire. And then also what it does too is it stimulates blueberry rhizomes to shoot up, right? We know that fire was a management tool used by Native Americans for probably thousands of years. There's documentation early on in North America with Europeans coming here saying like there's fire everywhere. And landscape scale fire creates more edge. So it's kind of, when you send fire across a landscape, it'll burn a certain way, right? Based on the fuels or the wind or whatever it is. And then the next time you burn, maybe it goes this way. So you have a little bit of crossover and a little bit of, so that one little area where it's crossed over is burned twice now, where these other ones have just burned once. And in those areas, right on the edge of where those burns are, you'll get edge effect. You'll get a lot of growth. And that's what, that edge effect is what will attract species in, which attracts, like the foraging species that are looking for saplings and things like that, which then attracts folks in for eating those species, right? So what we did is across the island. This is actually on Stockton Island. This is on the barren side of the island. There's a bunch of red pines, and I was trying to figure out the pines that are around here. It kind of looks like a red pine, but the needles are shorter. I don't know. It's like a scrub pine or something like that. We have jack pines too that are similar to that. So we started looking at all these trees, and you can see that this tree, we call it a cat face, is this little scar right here. So when fire goes through a landscape, what'll happen sometimes is if it's wind-driven, fire acts like water. And so when it hits a barrier like a tree, it'll actually, like on a river where it goes around the rock and it eddies on the backside. So fire does the same thing. It eddies on the backside of the direction of where it's coming. And where it's eddying, it actually creates more heat. And so cambium in trees needs 140 degrees for like a minute to kill that cambium. And so that's what happened here. So either there was a log in front of this or it was wind driven from the other direction. But it basically injured that tree enough to create this cat face here. And this one has, and every time that it burns, it creates a scar, because then the tree tries to like regrow over that injury. It'll start curving in on itself. I don't know if you've seen that before, where they'll kind of curve in and you can see like the whole thing round and in the inside. But each time it burns, it creates an injury. This tree has about 5 fires on it, because each one, it marks each one. So we go through and we're starting to, this is a little increment borer. So we'll take bores or cores of these trees to figure out how old they are. And then through that, you can actually then figure out when the fires happened and the frequency of them. So this is one where we took a sample of, another example of cat face, and then fire-scarred stumps. So this is something that, I would always walk past and never really think of it. So these are old stumps that have been preserved, and how they've been preserved is actually through fire. So when fire goes through a landscape, it heats up all those trees, right? And it kind of liquefies the sap in the pine trees, and it settles it, right? It kind of like sinks it in and kind of stores it at the base. And like in the movie Jurassic Park, where they, the mosquitoes in that piece of pitch or whatever, like pitch is a preservative. So basically through fire, through frequent low intensity hot fires, the pitch in these trees have warmed up, have sunk to the base, and then when the tree was either cut or fell over or whatever it is, that base stays preserved because of that pitch. So a lot of these stumps are from the 1700s or so, and they've literally been sitting there for, a couple hundred years sometimes. And so you can go into these stumps, and we cut into them, and we cut out pieces of them. And you can see, so when we're talking about those scars, here's a fire right here, here's a fire right here, here's a fire right here. Each time a fire hits it, it makes an injury. And then the tree tries to go around it and grow past that. So you can actually see this will line up with the other side also, and then these other sides too. So we take these cookies, and you can see the lobes on this one. And what you can do is if this was a dead tree, that's one thing. But if it's a live tree, you can basically count back the rings, right? So if this is 2019, you can count back however many rings this is to this injury and say, oh, okay, there's a fire back in 1997. And then you count back again and get, okay, 1982, there was a fire. So another one just showing some lobes. Another one with a few more. This one has a lot in it. So you can see all the different fires across this. And this one has a ton on it. Now, why this is important is because, so I've worked in the park now for 20 years, and in that time we've had a few lightning strikes that have caused fire. And so, but this tree is showing a fire like every 8 to 10 years, right? Either that is the most unlucky tree because it's been struck nearly struck by lightning and burned every 8 to 10 years, or that is direct evidence of human anthropogenic fire on the landscape, right? Lightning does not happen that often in the same area to cause those injuries, but anthropogenic fire, that relationship causes those kind of injuries. So that's why that's significant right there. So we take all these, glue them to plywood, shave them, sand them down so we can really see the rings really well. And then what we do is we take cores. So that's an increment borer, and that's my daughter, who I drag around all the time and make her do stuff. And she's like, Dad. We'll take cores out of, this is a live tree, and you take this core out of it, and you can see all the rings in there. I'm pointing at it, and assuming that you're seeing me point at it, sorry. Here's me pointing at it better. We glue those to pieces of wood, and then we sand those down as well. And you can see the rings a little bit better. Then we take them and line them up on these pieces of paper, the rings. So you can see all these little hash marks are the rings, the annual rings, right? And then what you can do is you can actually match up trees. So if we take from a live tree, you know that first ring is 2018 or 19, right? And then you start going back. And because all of these trees respond to drought or respond to like rainy seasons the same way. So you can see like here was a pretty good year of growth, right? Whatever that is, 1951 or something like that. And then here's some pretty droughty years. All of the trees will respond the same way. So what you can do is on these stumps, you can find the patterns, which is super neat. So you take a live tree, 2019 tree, and you mark out that whole core. And then you take the stumps and you try and find where, like, the skinny years line up with thick years, right? And you can find all these patterns. You can see, like, on this top tree right here, or this top core, these patterns line up, right? And then they line up to another one. And then if you take all that whole table, you can start lining out when all these fires actually happen. Because you have your 2018 base date. You can go back in time. So we're getting trees, into the 1700s based on that. So basically, you can kind of see it again in this, where you have like a matching pattern. 5 minutes? Jeez. Okay, sorry. So you have a matching pattern right here. Jeez, that flies fast, eh? Basically, so yeah, you can get back to early 1700s. So we've used all of this then to help justify. And then this on top of working with elders. So we were able to combine the traditional ecological knowledge of elders, knowing that there's only a few elders that are still even around these days that remember it. But they remember, you would ask them like, well, how often would you burn? And they say every 6-7 years, something like that. And then that anecdotal evidence of these elders going out there matches with the scars that we're seeing out there. And it's like this is it, right? So what we did is to answer the question of whether or not we should burn. We brought everybody together. We brought state agencies, tribal agencies, other feds, other county folks together in a big room, and we had actually the director of fire for the National Park Service come and help facilitate like a conversation that lasted all day. And in the end, we decided we're going to do it. We're going to put fire on the ground again. That's like a 180-degree flip from everything we had done before. So in order to carry this out, what we did is we to honor the culture that is guiding us now with this fire management. When folks would burn a long time ago, they would do a ceremony to do it. So it wasn't just like putting fire on the ground. They would do a ceremony for it. So we invited basically any tribe within the area to come out and do this feast, do this ceremony. So we had about, like 80 people out there. We had, I think, 14 different tribes represented. That came out to the island. We loaded this huge boat up and went out. We feasted. We had bundles, did everything we were told to do. And then we did like a site visit. So we showed them the barrens from the scientific standpoint and then the TEK standpoint. Showed them the blueberry bush with the red pines in the background. Oh, what is that? I don't know what that was. Was that a picture? Okay. Anyway, so that was leading up to the burn, the ceremony and site visit. And then we got the burn window to actually pull it off. So the day of the burn, we met out there. There was a picture of us. So anyway, at the day of the burn, we again used tobacco and had a ceremony. This guy here, Vern Northrup, somebody who I had known for a very long time, who had helped getting fire going in Fond du Lac Reservation, was there to help because he just wanted to be there when we did it. And so we asked him to put the first spark on the ground. We were using a flint. We're trying to start the fires with that because just to remind everybody where all this came from, like what we're doing. So he was the first one to actually put fire back on the ground, which is pretty cool. And are these not going to load now? Which would be great. Nope. So when we do a fire, we do a test burn. So this is our test burn. And basically we just do that just to see like what it's going to behave like, what it's going to do. And if it looks like it's going to be a good thing, oh, that was a picture too. I'll have to show y'all. But it took us a while to actually get it started with that flint because we had to use some gas to help it out. So yeah, we cheat a little. One thing we did do is we tried to protect every single red pine that was out there, so we would put fire on it immediately, and then as the main fire was coming through, backing through, it would hit that red pine and it wouldn't hurt it as much because it already had gone through, and this, I'll get all nerdy with this if I need to, but like residence time is what kills cambium, right? So if you already burn it and it goes through quick and then the slow fire comes through, it's not going to have that time to kill it. So this is just another example of, it's kind of like dot firing techniques of it going. You can see how dense it is, the understory there. There's a marker tree that was actually in the burn unit as well. This one that's bent like that. Folks used to bend those over. This is I wanted to show this because this guy right here, his name is, I can't remember his name right now. His last name is Kadat. And it would have been his great-grandparents out on that island picking blueberries and burning, and now he's back out there on that island burning. So like we closed that suppression gap, we closed that story right there with having him. We had a couple other people from Red Cliff and Bad River helping us burn as well. So there's some more cool fire shots. That guy right there, Ron Nordine, he's also a tribal member from Red Cliff. His parents or great-grandparents would have been out there. So basically just fire. And then we kept a little bit of heat towards the end of the day because, like in true Wisconsin fashion, we had brats for dinner. So in closing, just to leave you with this, and again, I'll be around, so if you all want to get deep on this, I'd be happy to do so. Why this is important. So what? Like, who cares, right? For me, what this means is restoring not only that cultural practice, but restoring the landscapes that our identity is based on. So going back to the beginning, all our ways of thinking, the values, our understandings, the relationships that we have with the world around us are based on the world that we live in, right? But the world that we live in used to be managed more with fire. So from my perspective, all the suppression that's happened has not only suppressed the ecosystems, but suppressed the ecosystems that our culture depends on, right? So putting fire back on the ground actually gets the species, gets the way it looks, all that stuff back to what my identity is, right? And part of this, what I think is super cool, is, in the fire world, we always talk about natural ignition, which is a lightning strike, or human ignition, that they're two differentiated between each other. But in Ojibwe culture, lightning is caused from B'nai Siwag, thunderbirds, right? And thunderbirds are animate beings, right? In our language, B'nai Siwag is an animate being. So what that means for us is that there is no such thing as a natural ignition. It is all being ignition. Either they start it or we start it, right? There's no difference. So either they're doing a prescribed burn or we're doing a prescribed burn, right? So even just that way of thinking about it is unique and different, and that's what we're trying to restore with this. So I'll leave y'all with a blank screen, which was a really awesome something. I don't even know what it was. But anyway, so again, I'll be around. I just, basically this is about restoring our, we talk about fire adapted or fire dependent ecosystems. It's my belief that our culture is also fire dependent and fire adapted. So that's all I have. I'll be around. Let's hang out. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Damen.